what do we do in the event things change for us as Hawaiians? And so, and I had this discussion with my son-in-law one night. I think he stayed up nearly all night drinking beer. So he says, you know, Mom, he said, you lived an ideal situation that most people may not have lived because there was no kala on the property. So when Grandma needed flour and sugar, we went and cut heads of cabbage, took it down to the Wichita store and bartered for it. So in this coming of the new nation, is it possible to do this all over again? To me, that is Pono. That is correct. This is what we lived with, and I know can go back to it, providing that we use our brains to make it work for each of us. Our next door neighbors were Japanese, and they had the egg farm there. So we traded with them when they had their own vegetable garden. We had what they had what we wanted. They had the eggs. We had chickens too, but it wasn't enough to sustain 17 people on a daily basis. So we each had our own chores to do, and each of us had a job, no matter how young you were or how old you were. We tended the horses, we tended the cows, all the small animals got tended to. When it was time to put the meat in the smokehouse, all the men came together and they killed the pua, cleaned it out. Grandma and the mothers, my aunties and my mom, all made things from what came of the inside from the Nile. So, is this something our nation can sustain? I'm not sure if we can, but it's a start. Many of us are going back to farming. So how does that farming look to us from a different point of view? Because I've gone, now what I speak of is something that I grew up with. Even though there's sustainability there, is it enough for what our young people can live with today because of the influence of the Western world? So how do we turn that around and make it work with one another, for us on an economic basis? You know, I'm not sure. Does one grow seeds and we trade with one another? Can we do that? It's just one of those kinds of things that I use.
It's actually,
No.
it's excellent. So I'm asking a question, what is Pono, but you're answering multiple questions. What does an economic system look like that we had? Can we have that again? Is it feasible? We need money, we have to pay rent, we want to buy this, that, and the other. So maybe looking for some way to blend those two things so that we can have the feeling of family interaction, cohesiveness, as well as the other side. And I think that this is kind of not moving in that direction because number one, we had it, but we don't have it. And those who do have it are probably rural, and then they only have a portion of it. Because the reality is money, we've all become money dependent. I like that. But I know other people have other ideas. Well, maybe happening.
For housekeeping, sorry. You guys were all given post-its, and you're probably wondering why. So, two things. If I'm writing anything that you feel is not quite capturing what you said, or elements, please let me know. The other thing is, if there are things that don't get recorded, that's what the post-its are for, add your ideas. In the second part of this discussion, we're going to be whole bunch of different examples of things, and so it'll all add to the natural good.
Only person that you.
The other thing I really like, what he said just at the end there about how much is enough, and the kind of lifestyle that the younger generations are being brought up to, I guess, aspire for. So I think that's, maybe we'll talk about it in some other kind of ways later on, but that was key to me defining fun economics. How much is enough and what kind of lifestyle are we actually aiming for?
And that's a really good point too, because I like to know myself, we make assumptions, we don't ask. I mean, we have people here under 30, my goodness. And we make some assumptions that all the things that we're talking about go broadly, right across the spectrum, and we haven't really asked. So hold that thought, because I think that we just have more of that.
Yeah, I'm glad the younger generation, we're always speaking for them.
Yeah, have it, right? I'm your mother.
Yeah.
You know, just do it. Okay, so yeah, that is a prevailing thought.
When you said what is Pono, what came to mind to me is getting to the bottom of it, which is what is the intention? Because if you look at if we come forward with an intention, it always brings us back to, it's always a mark that we can go back to. And an intention for me, it would be something like, it's inclusive. It includes everybody. It includes the community. It includes family. And the term resources in that, for me, would be, like Auntie was saying, it doesn't matter what you bring to the table. Like my father, and when I tell a story, that he was raised in Ka'u. And every day when that canoe came in with the fish, everybody ran to the ocean. And if you put your hands on that canoe and you brought that canoe up, you took fish home. So it doesn't matter. I think that would, so resources, and money can be included too. If you have money, then you donate money. But whatever you bring to the table is important and valuable to the community. And it's I don't want to say benefit, but it literally feeds the community, and it metaphorically feeds the community.
I would say Pono is based on relationships that we have with each other, and when that relationship is challenged, things become not Pono. The elements are justice, respect, caring for each other.
Are the relationships that you're talking about between people?
Between people, yeah, trading, I think what Auntie said about her mom and her family, that's really what Pono is, when people care for each other. I have this, you need that, we share, we trade, so everybody has what they need.
I would add to that, right or wrong, that although we have interpersonal relationships, we also had relationships with the aina,
Yes.
the animals, the vegetables we grew. Hawaiians have relationship with everything. And being able to, I'm going to use the word harmonize. And so it becomes like an orchestra. It works, it plays, it
Big music.
makes good music.
Other thoughts, other thinking before I like the ones.
I'm just wondering what the context is. Pono economics, but in what place, in what context? I think for this emerging nation.
Yeah, for the nation.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to add, it's interesting all the comments about interpersonal relations, but I have to, as we look at this emerging nation thing that we're looking at, I think we need to at least look at the assets, the properties that belong to you, right? We need to look at this land base and see what rights you have in it. To be able to bring about, like we talk about these interpersonal relationships. Where do they happen? On whose land?
Ahupua'a by Ahupua'a.
Ahupua'a by Ahupua'a, but I'm talking in terms of a more legal and political and property rights kind of context, right? We're not looking to get land from somewhere else. These are lands that already belong to you. 85% of all the land in Hawaii is either ceded lands or lands under the control of one of the trusts, the Aliʻi Trust. So that's an enormous body of wealth. What do we do with this? If we're developing economic policy, if we're developing, a sense of an economy, we can infuse it with our cultural and interpersonal relationships. But I think we need a more sort of hard and future look at this. Where are we now? Where are we going? And do we want to continue to be marginalized? I think an important question about this whole process of developing an economy. Is it a subordinate economy, subordinate to what the state, this new nation will exist in is? Is it a co-equal economy? Is it perhaps we need to consider things like independence, for instance? Is independence for all of us, not just for Hawaiians, but for all of Hawaii, is that a viable economic starting place?
But Uncle, I think while we've discussed all of that you say, there is a part that we need to look at. We need to start from the bottom, not from the top, to cultivate what we have, each of us. We all want the same thing for everybody. But there is going to be a body that will look for that. In the meantime, we as people need to be sustained. We cannot wait until the Hawaiian government, or whatever that's going to look like, say, okay, now here's the ceded land, we're going to take it back. It's going to belong. We're not going to be here that long. We cannot wait that long. We need to take care of things now. We need to look at each of the segments of how a government works. I am just a plain person who grew up on a farm, and I was privileged to have had the time with my grandparents on a farm, only 30 acres, that sustained a family. And really, if we go back to that, now if I had time to do that, I don't have time to look at that. My opponents don't have that time. I need to give to them before I leave this earth something that will sustain their bodies, their minds, and their spirit. We can get into the political part of things later. Let someone else do that while we develop what we think our nation needs to be sustainable. I think sometimes we look at what was taken and not look at what we can benefit from today. What can we give our our young people today? They need something. They know all about the ceded land. They know all about the old. But what are we going to do about online? What are we going to do about that? That's why I'm here. I want to hear what other Hawaiians have to say regarding the economics of our children. We can talk about the ceded lands and all what the government has taken from us, but that is talk. And until we can dig in the ground, plant that taro, and eat it, we don't have sustainability. We go back to what we do every day. I'm a school principal. I work with kids. I'm satisfied with what I do. But I love what we do here. I love what I grew up with. And that, to me, can sustain me, not only in thought, but in the earth, the aina. There is something there that we need to do. While, Uncle, you take care of the politics side, we take care of the food.
think that's a wonderful, actually, segue. You know, the reason for having this discussion is because we are as a Civic Club making some assumptions about the future. And you're right. We're not gonna wait for the hootie, whatever. We actually have to start laying things in place so that when we get to that point, we have a head start. We're running already. The other thing is we make some assumptions that the things that we wanna see happen haven't happened. As a matter of fact, they are happening. They're happening on the ground all the time, but we don't know about it because there's nobody keeping tally. There are movements everywhere for, not just in Hawaii, by the way. So, you guys watch reality TV, everybody and his mother is moving into the forest. We see the future. Everybody is looking at what does it mean to have a small home instead of a really huge home with 2 or 3 cars, so you can put your stuff in it. So the idea of collecting stuff is becoming less and less important as people look at a future that goes down the road for their children. So one of the things we haven't done is identify resources. What is a resource when we're talking about resources? We're talking about land and water only. We're talking about land and water and people. How about history? Is history a resource? Absolutely. And you know where you're going? You didn't know where you came from? You're going to be repeating the same thing over and over again. But you get to avoid it, been there, done that. The discussion is meant to tease out those ideas because ultimately what we want to do with your help is to create a screen. I mentioned that earlier. We asked the question, what does it mean to be Pono? What is Pono? Because after you lay that out, anything that filters down makes sense as economic development within a Pono framework. So we're still working on the screen itself. What is it? What is Pono? What does it mean? And what kinds of things do you want to see as, for example, you want to do this, that is not Pono. How I know that is because it didn't go through, didn't come through, and we have already laid out all these criteria that if you don't meet it, we ain't doing it. Got that? But it's like that. Hence the discussion. And it's good because what I'm hearing is like fascinating. The stuff that you're saying is absolutely essential. I don't know if we're ready to go there yet because we don't even know where we are right now. If somebody wanted to start a business, what is a Pono business? What is that? We didn't develop the framework yet. I don't know. I mean, I know what I don't like. Go ahead.
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Good to see you. Chuck Larry, Pono Civic Club. First of all, I just want to say I'm not Hawaiian. Koko, I'm not a descendant of the cities of the improvement. So, but I choose, one of my passions is learning Hawaiian culture, and the reason is just for personal sustainability as a human being on Earth, and realizing that I have a connection to the Aina, all life that sustains life, and also have studied. I was a CPA, so I have a really strong business background, as well as science. And my opinion about what is Pono is that any sort of economic activity, because if you look at the definition of economics, it is the allocation of scarce resources for unlimited needs. If you have scarce, and that's where you get the whole supply and demand. If the supply goes down and the demand is high, the price goes up. So it's all looking at the whole money thing. So the degree that you can get away from this whole idea of an allocation, the unlimited needs, we as humans have to realize that we have to limit our needs. Otherwise, as all life, we will consume until it's gone. I mean, you take a petri dish and you open it up and you close it. Open for 10 seconds and close it. Stick it in a closet. In a week, you look at it. Oh, look at all the beautiful little bacteria things growing in there. Come back in another week, it's like, oh, it's starting to look kind of crowded in there. And oh, that smell. What's that? Come back in 3 weeks, everything's dead because it's all been used up. And that's like planet Earth. And it's like Hawaii. The same thing will happen. So we can't be like the bacteria and just grow and grow and grow. We, as conscious beings, and this is what the kapuno and the things that I learned from Hawaiians and Hawaiian culture is that there has to be, I mean, kapus existed because they realized that there were unlimited desires, but there has to be a limit, and kapu was about limiting those desires and looking at how is it that all forms of life are working around here, and what is the balance as far as water, and how do we create more water? The Pono field system, it actually created rain, it held the soil on the ground, it did flood control. I mean, it took centuries for them to develop that. And so those kinds of wisdoms that have already been created and developed, it's like people, unfortunately today, they want to come here and create a job for themselves from the mainland, and they don't take the time to learn what's already been learned. They try to bring what they've learned and apply it here, and it may or may not be appropriate, but they want a job here and they want to live here, and so they have their own personal need, and that's just a human thing. And I know it's frustrating for the Hawaiians, but even Hawaiians have that same mindset as well. The ones that want to come back, they have to create jobs for themselves, and so they have a system that they have to follow within. But we, as everyone in our nation, everyone on this planet, has got to change the way that we're looking at things. And what I pray for and hope for is that the Hawaiian people will be able to go back and rediscover the knowledge that their Pono had, and will be able to find some way to create economic value and allow, if there is trade, it's from surplus. It's because there's so much plenty here that we have food to give. There's food to give away. There's products to give away, or trade, or get trade with other people in value. Because we can't keep burning oil. We're isolated. How are things going to get here? 95% of things are shipped in here. Developing the domestic economy and becoming independent from an economic standpoint, where we're not dependent upon bringing things in, is essential for Pono economics.
A couple things that I hear you saying. One is that we are sort of caught in a particular Western definition of economics. And I grew up in a house with my grandparents. We're not rich, but we had abundance. How come we had abundance? Because our next door neighbor had this humongous mango tree. We were waiting for that tree. We knew that we were going to eat from that tree. And the neighbors across the street had a big tangerine tree. We waited for that. So the abundance wasn't in our possession. You might say it was on the hook. It was coming. But when you live with that mindset, you always have plenty. We never looked at scarcity, because we always ate. We didn't have the money, but we always had food, and we always had food to share. And I'm not even sure how that happened, because we sure didn't buy it. I mean, so there's this thing that was going around, this kind of a sharing philosophy that doesn't take us down the path of scarcity. I don't know if that makes sense to you. And it never occurred to us that we were poor until, of course, we wanted to go shopping and then we didn't have any money. So they're like, oh, we're poor. But we were well fed. So there's this thing about how we define what it is that we want to create. And if you think about our lives as being based on a model of scarcity, you will plan accordingly. And if you think about our lives, our culture, what we want for the future, is something that's built on a concept of abundance. You will not only have enough for yourself, you got enough to share. And then you have to think about the ramifications, the effects of sharing. People have waited for our mango tree too. And then I remember somebody telling a story that when they had everything was blooming, they would put the fruit on the wall, if there was a wall, and anybody who was walking by was free to help. This is not trade. This is take it. It's yours. And the sign of abundance kind of raises your status actually in the community. The relationship building that we had is talking about is an effect of abundance. If you get plenty and you share, nobody asks you. In fact, they shouldn't even ask you. right? You should share. Everybody watching your mangoes, for goodness sake. So you get the kids running to everybody's house with a bag of mangoes. Or if you're doing the hukilau and you're cleaning all the fish, you got excess fish for those who did not participate or were sick or whatever, and they get fish because the kids are going to run up and deliver it. But they don't ask. The whole idea of asking for help never even occurs to you because people know what the need is and they meet the need before you ask. I don't know if you ever had that experience, but I thought everybody was growing up like that. What a shock later on when I realized that they weren't. So the stories that we share about our own history and growing up, which I don't know if that happens anymore, because now I think it has sort of shifted to this thing about this must be first, but this must make that be first. I don't know. I think.
I don't know if you've got anything done as far as screening what is
Well, we're trying to like build screen.
I think we need to perpetuate things like Aloha Aina, number one, Aloha Mako, Aloha for all of us as the people. And I like what Chuck was saying about examples that already exist, like the agricultural fields. There's still a lot of the ancient agricultural fields that haven't been destroyed yet. And I think we need to start reusing those things. And fish ponds, local there's a nationwide effort for restoring, streamlining the process to restore the local so we can start producing fish in the local things like that. Those are things that are already coming online. And I'm having a difficult time finding the feasibility of just taking what you need from whatever you can produce and giving everything else away for free. Because what you need might not be free somewhere else. So I think we need to create like a clearinghouse for produce and things like that. Clearinghouse for services, skills that people have, things like that. So if you have something you can donate and maybe perhaps you get some credit for the value of whatever you donated to that clearinghouse. And if people need skills or something like that, some kind of exchange can be going on between food and skills, labor, things like that.
That's all that's.
You've got a cooperative.
That's what's called labor exchange and trading. So people throw it in a pot. I'm a dentist. I can't provide that. And then somebody else says, I got cat labels.
Yes.
How about that? Yeah.
Anybody thought about kanakadalas? Some kind of a piece of paper that you can exchange for different colors for whatever it is for, and easily use it.
Yeah. What's that called?
Bitcoin.
Community dollars, right?
Yeah.
It's called.
Or Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. But wait a minute. So is a Bitcoin or a community dollar the same as a dollar?
Yes.
In terms of intent. And so are we talking then about?
A medium of exchange.
Yeah,
Medium of
exchange.
exchange.
So what you do is you added an extra step.
Yes.
That's why I added an extra step?
I think you're gonna need that liquid asset in case what you need is not available that's for exchange or whatever you had.
Yeah.
You might need to buy certain things. I think you need some kind of liquid asset that can be used for everything, and that would be like
In terms of
currency.
money,
One thing that was built into the net system was you couldn't keep your points after a certain amount of time. And so instead of being, I'm the doctor, so I get to charge this much, and your exchange for walking my dogs is only worth that much, it equalized what the value was, so that you didn't want to build up a whole lot of points because at the end of the year,
It wasn't, yeah.
so it shifted the value, how much value you get.
I think like when we talk money, it's like the value has been determined by exchange with other countries, et cetera, what have you. But I think we always have to remember money. The only value money has is what we put on it. If you look at a tree, if you look at a plant, if you look at the water, if you look at all of that, that value is completely different. And so that's where I think it's very easy for us to kind of steer away from the natural value and kuleana of natural resources, and then we start to go into that money thing. And money, if you put money on the ground, it's gonna do nothing. It's not gonna feed you, it's not gonna house you. It's only determined by us. It's power. So I think somewhere in that screen, we have to weigh that out.
Do we need that medium, I know you call it a liquid asset, something that you might be able to think or consider for later. What is the benefit of personal exchange?
Free.
Equality.
Negotiation.
There are benefits with personal exchanges that you cannot necessarily have with an intermediary like a $50 or a dollar bill. Your relationship is to that, not to that person. I mean, that's, so anybody can buy anything, it's very impersonal.
Okay.
But when you're doing the thing that you did, you know your neighbor, the neighbor knows you, you get to depend on each other.
But you also develop a relationship with the stores in and around you. We only had one store, and so they took what we gave them, and they gave us what we needed. So that bartering system was such that it was something that you could depend on. And working with your neighbors, to me, the bartering system was something that I grew up with and can also continue to live on if need be, but you have to have that community input with one another.
Well, before I get to her question, let me ask you a question. If they didn't have anything to exchange, would you give it to them anyway?
Yes,
So you're not really
It was
talking
not
about
a-
bartering. You're actually talking about gifting, and they're gifting you back. So it's not one for one.
well, when we took the cabbage down to barter, yes, it was a one-to-one. So, he would give, Grandpa would give 4 bags of cabbage. And in each bag, there was 4 heads of cabbage. Okay, so it was weighed, and then if Grandma needed 10 pounds of flour, rice, sugar, that's where they had come together and say, well, I need 2 more bags of cabbage to make it even. Okay, so he would go, cut some more cabbage, bring it down, at the end of the day, Grandma had her sugar, whatever it was. So it was a one-to-one. It has to be, in order for it to be equitable. Okay, so because
But
then
in addition, you're saying there was also a relationship.
there is also a relationship amongst the community now. Okay, because Tanaka didn't have enough butter, let's say, because we churned our own. We would share. But during those days, the butter that was given to us in the store was,
Margarine.
That's
That's so funny.
I can't remember what it's called, but, you would put coloring in it to make it.
Nucor.
Oleo, margarine.
Nucor.
That's right. That's it.
Yeah.
What?
Nucor.
Yeah, that's what we did. So, and we did our cream, and so there was lots that we did on the farm that could be used for direct bargaining. So, but there was lots of sharing. My other neighbor down the way across the gulch he had lots of cattle. So when it was time for breeding, my grandpa's bull was used for that. So even though it was not food, it was still yukokua.
Contributing.
So that's called multiply. That's what it was. But I'm not sure today, this is what we're looking for. Because we've gone beyond that. So
let's not make a decision for any people who are not yet in that discussion. I think that young people actually may have a kind of nostalgia for something you've never experienced that you're explaining. Go ahead.
Well, I think when we're talking about exchanging and giving, we're talking about a lifestyle. And that's what this Pono is. We're living Pono, so we need to understand that Pono is a lifestyle. That's what Pono economics is. And as the next generation, I can tell you that that is what we want. But
I'm so happy. I'm so happy.
But there's, I know, like, I think we're like at the top right now. We're kind of like looking up here, and we need to start from the bottom. And just getting out of high school, trying to figure out what I want to do. I have all these dreams, and I don't even know where to start. And I like look at where I need to be, and I think what we need to harness first is our foundation, which is our land. There's no land. That's what we need. Like, how are we supposed to build a community if we don't have any land? We have all these dreams and visions, but we can't do it because we don't have anything. And I mean actually ours, actually mine. And that's, we don't have that. And you can, and my mom learned this. She would force me to go to all these Hawaiian events. Yeah, and I didn't want to do any of it. I mean, I did. But I didn't want to wake up at 4 in the morning and go to a ceremony sometimes. But I did love doing it. But you know, you can. The point is like you can give us all these resources. You can go beyond the moon and do everything for us. But it's our choice to harness it. So you know, you have to see what we want too, because we, you know, you're our resources. So when I look at what I need, I'm looking at to build a Pono economics. I'm looking at that I need land, and I want to build on top of that. And then my roots are my kupuna, my akua, and I'm going to use you guys for what we need, how to build this Pono relationship.
It's a start.
It's a start, and I think what we need is land, and we just need to start building our Pono community. And people will come. People with the same vision, they'll come with us. And it doesn't matter if you're Hawaiian or you're not Hawaiian. What one of my teachers taught me that was really important is that, you know, being Hawaiian isn't your blood. You know, there's good and bad everything. There's good white people, there's bad white people. You know, it doesn't matter. It's your way of living that makes you Hawaiian. It's living Pono that is going to make you Hawaiian. And if we set foundation, people with the same vision, especially my generation, because they don't know where to go, they don't know what to do. They say we're so destructive is because we don't have any resources. We don't have anything to harness onto. There's nothing. So if we just build this Pono community, people are just going to start coming with the same vision, and they're just going to build on top of it. That's just, I think, what we need to do. To really, like, I know our ideas are, like, all over the place right now. We need to, like, have that foundation. Like my mom was saying, we need to build those laws, those Pono laws for our community.
Actually, what you're saying is where we want to go. Okay, so what comes to mind? We want to be talking to the young people, I tell you. When you put on a workshop like that, and who comes? Everybody who's about your age. And then we have like a couple of young people, and I think, wow, cool. Because what you're saying on the voice of young people in your generation don't get heard. Because nobody ever asked. And I can relate to you dragging your kids around, but damn, I dragged my kids around, and as we all did, and forced them. All kids.
Well, that's kids.
But what happens? Well, is they get it. You know, early on, they get it. And they begin to practice it, not knowing really how much they have benefited from being exposed early on. You know, and all the parents can relate. You're dragging your kids someplace, and they were fighting every inch of the way. But now they get it. They work so hard.
Well, it wasn't that I was fighting my mom against it, just because I felt like I wasn't being heard. Because I felt like my mom was talking where she got that. And I sat down with her and I was like, one day I was like, no, I'm not going. I'm not going until you listen to me, because I'm the one who's going to be doing this for the rest of my life. I'm the one who's going to be building my community. You need to listen to me. And she finally sat down and she was like, you're right. We need to listen to you. And she's like, so what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to go and blah, 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 and do this ceremony, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, okay, go do that. And it became more enjoyable. It became a passion. Because it's something that I wanted to do. I wasn't being spoken for.
Sounds like we need to step out of the way.
I think the way we think of ourselves politically has a lot to do with whether we can live economics. But if you believe that you are sovereign, then you will know how to live more economics. If you believe malamaaina, easy. Yeah, you know what I mean? But also knowing that we are sovereign, there is no treaty of annexation, we know the whole political situation of our status as a nation today, then that will definitely influence how you're going to live. Pono.
I think, as we discussed for economics, I think we could neither just look at one model and then everything else could be built off of that in the future. And I think we need to look at the basic necessities of food. I'm really concerned about city dwellers, like rate housing. Those people, they have no idea or anything that they can work to produce things. There's going to be needs to be a very coordinated effort, organizing and stuff, to locate all of the resources like the ancient agricultural plots and things like that. And then match up people that don't have INA up with those INAs so that they can go there and work and contribute something. And eventually, hopefully, we'll count on its welfare and stuff like that. But people need to contribute, able-bodied people. So we're going to need a very it's going to be a complicated process, but we're going to need people that organizing and coordinating all these activities, especially for the city dwellers that don't have resources where they can produce something to exchange or give away for free or whatever. And I was talking about like a clearinghouse where if you have extra, you can deposit some there. And I think if you have abundance, maybe half should be given away and half should be going into your credits. You're going to have people, they don't have anything, they kind of trade anything like that. So in the beginning, some people are going to have a real hard time, and then they're going to need that free donation from whoever has abundance.
I want to go back just briefly to the fact that what we were doing was creating a screen that was made up of our ideas of what is Pono. Somebody said, and there are many, and Penny has them all listed. If you have a screen up there that says Maile is Pono, and sharing is Pono, and the community sharing is Pono, and the family coming together is Pono, if you have all of these things in place on a screen, what you have created is a filter. It's a filter. All of these things are Pono. The businesses or whatever you want to engage in are at the bottom. What kinds of things will filter through that meet that criteria that end up as something that we might want to develop as an economic base of a nation? That's what we were trying to do, is get people to share their ideas and see what comes out of the bottom. So I will ask you, other than what you're saying, which I think fits, so far, fits the criteria, kind of what's called a lead system, where you put your resources, whatever they are, food, fish, into the pot, so to speak, and someone else has access to it. And then they're putting something and you have access to that. And it's that kind of a trading system that's going on. That's a model. But what other models are there that anybody can think about? What would meet the system's needs? I mean, that and then come through on the other side.
I'm so glad you spoke of that Civic in Kalani, because, I mean, the reason there was the overthrow was because of land. So land was why this all started, and it's what is going to eventually have to be. Getting the land back has been the struggle. So land is, I think, the box that holds the screen. And
That's a good way to describe that.
so, and then I think you have to look at what are basic human needs: housing, food, water, air, um, and health.
Well, that should be in there as fish and pork, because it is us. That is our life, our existence. It's fish and pork.
So metaphorically speaking,
And
fish and
health.
pork covers everything that you
And
you
health,
said.
and
Yeah.
health, and
You
health,
need
and
food.
health especially today, because
It's on that.
the healthcare system of this nation in Hawaii is collapsing. And so we're gonna have to start turning to ourselves to care for each other and to learn how to be healthy. Not just in a critical, diagnosis with cancer, heart attack, whatever situation, but how to help prevent situations that would create the need for health care. And that's living in a living in a Pono fashion.
Well, that's how you
Which is-
said, fish
but-
and pork, same thing.
Right.
It gets
No, I
fish and
know.
pork.
And what's great about the local IA is the local IA is at the bottom of the Ahupua'a. It's the canary in the coal mine. The fish in the local IA can only be as healthy as the vai coming down. Okay? What they're finding in the water now, they're finding pharmaceuticals, they're finding corrosive chemicals, they're finding all kinds of stuff that's in the water that we take in and it comes out, and then, that's just the way it goes. So, I know
What you're
a lot.
advocating is really a new
Rewriting.
system.
Yes.
No, the old system, which is causing the problems that contribute to our ill health and unwellness, that system has to move over and something else has to be in its place. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm
Something
saying.
that promotes the whole fish and pork metaphor for
Yes.
everybody and for the land. Is that kind of
And
what you're
that,
saying?
exactly, and that enables the future generations to continue. I mean, when we look at the global situation that's going on, it's overwhelming, because you've got global warming. Well, what can we do about global warming? I mean, we can each individually take actions, but the reality is, if you look at the average American and their level of education and what they're doing, if the Hawaiian nation is going to move forward in a world that is deeply troubled and the future is very scary, how do we get rid of that fear and be resistant to that fear?
If you're talking about system change and regime change, which is what it sounds like, the reality is we're going to be a Pono nation in an unpono world. That tells us that our reach has got to extend beyond ourselves. You want that world to be ready for us, or we're going to step into something that's going to be very, very difficult to change. So our efforts at making that change cannot stop at our border. I mean, you have to be, it's kind of like sending out emissaries. You have a particular way of being in the world that contributes to your wellness and the wellness of everything around you. You want to make that known to others because you want them to be ready before coming. That's a really, really big work. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm saying it's a wonderful thing to aim toward. So I don't know who said it in some other discussion. Start here. Because here is small enough, you can grab it. You start here and then you work on, and when our nation is in a place to be healthy, well, it has to keep going.
This is a little different, and I may be a little off, but for me, right now, it feels right. But I kind of look at Pono as the outcome. If you do all these things, the outcome is Pono. And I kind of maybe reading between the lines of what she's saying, but I kind of get this feeling that it's about self-worth also. Like she was talking about, like she said, I don't know how to do it. I don't know what to do. And I see a lot of our younger kids just feeling this not worthy because they don't know where they belong or where they fit in. And I think that, their they're part of the system that we need to get into. So I think we need to look also beyond those physical needs, but also, I think if we use the word kuleana, and kuleana could be, the kuleana could be to malama aina, because that basically covers everything in the end, but the kuleana could be to supply whatever you have. And in doing that, you have to feel worthy of yourself. And I think it's really important because I see a lot of people, I think we need to throw out the basic economic words, rich, apparent rich, and poor. I think we need to literally throw out those words and create new words that speak, that are equal, that speak to our culture, because we didn't bring those words in. We never had rich and poor.
Aloha.
Throw it out.
Being serious.
It was
Yeah.
aloha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to say that somewhere in here, I think that we have to decide what our needs are relative to what our wants may be. And whatever this list of needs, these are basic human, call it Pono needs if you want, which may then be tied up with rights, like should we make being hungry illegal, or should we make it so that we all would have some kind of way to have a roof over our heads? I know I'm talking about something that may be very ideal and maybe too far out there, but needs and satisfying them so that we can thrive.
So the aim is not to survive. The aim is actually to thrive, not to just make it, but to be abundantly having made it. I mean, so it puts you in a position of sharing really easily because you have it.
Take a moment, because we've been talking about this for quite a long time and we only have a certain amount of time to be here. We wanted to just briefly address that situation of how do we give to those who don't. In Hana, there's that English teacher who has created a program, and he teaches the kids in high school to be carpenters and electricians and builders. And when Auntie's house burns down, they go build her house again for her. When Uncle needs a wheelchair access for his house, they go build it. They fix for school, they do all these things, they do it in exchange, and it's not because it's a law or we say nobody should have a house, it's because they can, they're taken care of. So it's a fabulous model, and
Like fostering.
yes, exactly.
Teaching at the same time.
Yeah,
Boys,
and they come away with skills that they get tool sets that they can now go and practice those new skills in the library. So I want to shift the discussion to models because we can talk about this for a very long time, and I think it's going to be an ongoing discussion for all of us in each of our communities.
Actually, there are a bunch of models that are, things are already happening. We're not starting from scratch. They've been happening for a while, but they're kind of like under the radar because nobody really talks about it. We have a couple of examples, and one of the reasons we asked Isaac to come was to talk about one particular model of, I'm a person who does not like tourism. The concept of tourism was really upsetting to me, but it's not that I want people to come and visit. I like that part. I don't want them to come specifically because there was an exchange of money between them and some tourism company that is going to sell me my land, my culture, without my permission. I'm not even included in that picture. So one of the things, I say, talk about Cabrini project, please.
This was a project that was developed by Civic Foundation in Hawaii. And the two other board members here besides myself, Uchi is a board member and Cruz is also a board member. So if you want to add in anything as we move along, please do so. The Pacific Foundation Hawaii was looking for economic development models that were, I guess, Pono economics. And as most people know, tourism in Hawaii is like the #1 revenue stream. So we looked at that and how could we change that to fit in within this Pono model. the requirements is that it's by invitation only. If somebody wants to participate in a program with any one of it, not a tourist type of experience, but it's a host and visitor type experience. And if you as a visitor wish to spend some time with a particular host, you need to request permission and be invited to come and visit the host. And different hosts in different places on different islands have different needs. Like Molokai, they're financially declined economy. But a lot of those people, they want money in exchange for sharing the experience of staying with our family, who can show them around the island and visit our community members and things like that. The folks over in Pono on Maui, they were more inclined to accept volunteer labor to help with the low-ease and stuff like that. Rather than money, they were willing to accept garden tools and things like that in exchange. So looking at different models, so that's one of the things that we're working for. So we organize a lot of communities, and people in the room were involved. Some of the people in the room were involved in some of those communities that met with us. And we helped to develop a website where each of the communities could sell themselves to potential visitors and things. But the best thing about it is that the individual host community or family is able to create what type of screens and lay down pretty much the ground rules for anybody that wants to visit them. You have to meet all of these, be able to agree to all of these before we can invite you over. And then that's the basic concept of what we try to do.
One of the things that happened was here in Waimanalo, on Oahu. They found out, the community there found out that there were tour groups coming into their community and driving around, and then on a tour, the tour guide who knows where they get information, giving people history about that place. And the people there didn't like it. Number one, they don't know what they're talking about. What kind of history are you giving? Whose history is it? And so there was an attempt by community to first make sure that the information is correct, and who the hell are you to come in here and sell my community and make some money off it, basically. So those kinds of things were concerning. There were some groups that, like at Kaneakapupo on Oahu, the idea of having people come up and visit regularly, learn history, interact with the community, and what's required, but not really, is that you help along with that place. Then the side effect, the effects of having people come to that place, and they form a relationship not only with the host, but with the place. So if you go and you give your labor and you go along with that place, you're going to connect. You don't need me. I expect to see you there in the future because these things are ongoing. And in practice, 10, 11, 12 years later, practice, it's still happening. People go away, they come back. 10 years later, you guys still going up there? We're coming. And so that connection, that bond is a bond, between you and whoever, wherever is placed. Not necessarily the host, but definitely the place. So when we talk about relationships, it doesn't necessarily have to be between people. It's about you and the environment, you and the spirits, and it's full of those. I mean, so who's calling? Not for us to decide. I don't know. But the main thing is that connection is made, and then you act accordingly. So the hope was, that it would go beyond a money exchange and into a relationship exchange. So if I'm coming to Berkeley next week, friend, I need a place to stay. You pick me up at the airport. I mean, basically that exchange.
Yeah. I think that's the color. My name is Tasha, and I'm from Nakikio, Hawaiʻi in Anchorage, Alaska. And I think that it's important for whatever model we choose to use to be explained to the youth and the people that are living in that unfunnel world, because it's realistic to have to use money sometimes, but examples like that is really good. So your friend comes to visit you and you take care of them, and then when you go there, you take care of them. And that's kind of stuff that, like Uncle was saying, you go to Mayor Rights, they don't have a place to grow. And where I'm from the city, I'm from Kaliʻi and Kaneohe in Hawaii, we don't have land to build on. We don't have
our trade we learned in school or by working at uncle's house or whatever. And so we don't always have something tangible to give to people. And I think our youth growing up and having to fly into cities and live amongst people that don't understand what is Pono can create some kind of barrier, or and just make it really hard. So giving examples to us who find it on the continent really hard to or not, maybe not hard, because I feel like it's in us already.
Yes.
To want to live like that.
Yes.
We already do it already, yeah. But just to make that known that stuff like that is living Pono and holding it.
That's what I was screen.
One of the host of the host visitor model is that we meet people from different parts of the world, invite them in, and hopefully our spirit, some of our spirit gets transmitted over to them, and they can take that back home. So it's kind of like sharing aloha with the world, a sense of aloha aina. So that's one of the benefits we're hoping to achieve through that program. Not only some economic benefit or labor or whatever
But that is an economic model.
Yeah.
But it's just not dependent on money exchange.
Yeah.
So when we first started talking about this community-based host visitor experience, what we were looking at was the idea of peace model, peace on earth, goodwill or something in practice. So you can talk what you like. People talk about peace and blah blah blah, but it makes no sense if you're not practicing it. So if you disguise it as a alternative tourism thing, and you practice your culture, that's why I say I'm sure you're doing it. Wherever you are, you're stuck, you guys, too late. If you grew up in Hawaii, you get them. And so you don't even realize that you're practicing your culture somewhere else, and people like it. People like it. Soli's daughter told me one thing. She went to medical school right away, and the Hawaiian had a really hard time. Because she was invited to go out, and she said, go to medical school, you got no money, right? And if you're being funded or whatever, do it. If you don't, you're limited on your resources, and they would come to her place and they would eat, because she had food. Yeah. And so, she's feeding them. She said they thought she was crazy. Because she had to open up her little space to feed the people, the other students who didn't have. She was shocked at the fact that they would take advantage of her if they didn't do it, because she grew up in such a way that is normal. People need food or they're hungry, you should feed them. You grow up in this way, you do it all the time, and then you come up against another culture that is going to use you. And I tell you, back off real quick, now you don't want to do it, because it's not to your advantage to be who you are outside of this area.
Aloha, my name is Maxine Kaho'olelio. I was invited by my activist friends over here. They all live in Kamuela. Talking about the tourist thing, I just came from a meeting at Kanuokaʻaina. There's a turnover now at school, and my children, and we have a child here that went to Kanuokaʻaina. And of course, my good friend over here worked, and we worked, but there's a whole transition now, it's turning over. And I'm glad I went to the meeting, but I couldn't stay because somebody gave me a call to come here. Anyway, what's happening? We have a new principal. It's called Po'o Kulayada. Well, her name is, her last name is Paishan Durati. And the party was so funny because if you look at Kanuokaʻaina, it's like a tourist trade right now. You guys talking about all this individual. We have a lot of poʻehaulis coming to Kanu right now. And I started back in 2004, a long time ago with my children, and she will tell you too. So now we have a multicultural school, and I just said everything is lost. So what happened was all our teachers, our kumu, which was Kanaka, is gone. They let them go. They fired them. Or they let them go. And they do this. So I'm saying, how can you name the school Kano'o Ka'aina? Kulia Ikanu. What is that? To strive. Strive what? So I just came from that meeting and I wish I could stay. I wanted to stay, but I wanted to come to the meeting. And I just wanted to voice my opinion because this is where it happens in the school. And a lot of our children are so mixed up right now in Kano because their teachers are all gone, or what happened with the transition is they took Auntie Auhia Puhi, who has been the senior advocate for, and then put her into the elementary. And then you take that teacher and you put them over there, and that's not where you put the teacher over there, because she's kanaka maole, she's mo'olelo kanaka. And then you put this other teacher, I you know, a little dark skin like us, we're brown, but the other one, little, you know, a little bit papa. And she's teaching now. So the kids are looking at her and she don't know the culture. She don't know what Kano is all about. But you're right. They don't know where to go because on accreditation that we do in our chartered schools, accreditation is a grant. And when you get this federal grant, you have to dismiss all our Kanaka because they're no more the Palapala. And then you get the other teachers who get the Palapala. Kalamai now, I'm not being racial, please. But they have the Palapala, but they no more the culture. They're no more the inside the na'o, the dirt, the lepo. And it was just so funny, that meeting. And I said, I told her, you need to have this meeting again, because we cannot do it in an hour. There's so much, heva to, so much to kuka, but we need to start in the schools. We're losing it. Please, listen, we're losing it. And Kanu'o Ka'aina is in Kamoela, is in Waimea, on Hawaiian homes. How can we teach our children the land bases, the lo'i and everything? Yes, I love Chad. I mean, the sailing of the hokulea, the makali'i, my kailoa. What about the reality of these children when they step out of that perimeter and hit the westernized thing? It hurts me. And you know, I'm part Portuguese, so I just talk like it. I'm Kanaka, but I'm part Portuguese, you know.
You're confused.
Love you, my darling.
I want to get back to what Penny was saying as far as models, because and you're saying that the word's not out. So I think a really good starting point so that the wheel is not being reinvented is to identify what are the wheels on this vehicle that's trying to be creative here.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I think that your question is then going to move on to the second model that we were talking about, because there's another one that we don't.
Can I quickly respond to what you mentioned? We're eventually going to need to create our own, instead of the Board of Education, which is controlled by the occupiers. Now, we're going to have to create our own hui or ike or something like that to be able to fashion the education that we feel is Pono.
So we don't have to follow their rules.
Yeah.
It is,
It'll
yeah.
take a little while. The process is moving now, but we'll eventually get there.
So the point of actually having this discussion is the assumption that it is.
Yeah.
And so we don't really have to think about planning what should we have in place of that. We have a chance to build that from the bottom, bottom up. Everything that you're saying, it's not about transitioning from that to this, just build it, because you have an opportunity to do that. And you have a nation, a born, I mean, that kind of thing. Okay.
Don't forget to remind everybody that there's.
Yes, but first, I beg your opinion, then, whatever, okay. So, thank you for bringing us back to models, because we do want to shift to that. One of the really exciting things that is happening, and I think it addresses this issue of land and how do we come back to it. The Patel Task Force, which is, it was a legislative
we were able to ensure that the membership was no less than 50% trail farmers, actively or representatives from each island. And in the last couple of years, we've actually submitted legislation calling for the state to allow access and use and reopening of ancient trail lands for the purposes of feeding our own communities, our families, for bringing back into economic abundance. It doesn't get into the issue of who owns it. It gets into the point of this land was there, it was until production, and it's calling us back. And it's a way for us to make our communities well. It's a way for us to make our families well and to feed a nation. And while the discussion of bringing lands back into nationhood happens, we are starting to practice. In the legislature, we've had a number of things come up. One is the very quick response of everybody knows you can't make money as a child farmer. Who would want to do that? It's really hard work. When we look at the screen and when you ask ourselves as child growers, for those of you who came in later, I am also a child farmer. None of us do this because we're making money. We do it because we love it. And so for us, that model is kind of a natural evolution. When we start to ask the younger generation, there are guys coming out of high school, coming out of college saying, we want to go terrible, we don't have any access to land. Does it come to ownership, it just comes to access. And whether you're willing to practice.
So there is a movement, where people are saying, hey, that land is lined up there, let's go up there and grow taro. Who cares who it is? So makes the people just do it.
Yeah, so Huikalo is an example of some of that as well. It's 200 or 300 people come together, they help someone open land, and then it's completely on the person who received that gift of opening to keep it going and to feed the family, feed the community. So the legislative example is a challenging one because it's trying to change something within an existing system which may not at this time be the right endpoint thing, but it is a mechanism to open the door so that public practice can happen. And one of the struggles we've had is the voices of those who actually can help move that forward. Because we know the more people we get on the land, the more people will come, that the bigger the practices and the more examples that there are and the more resources there are to be able to connect with.
So one of the models, I have the one story, okay? You guys familiar with the SETI project? Do you know what SETI is?
Yes.
Okay, the SETI project, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, started maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And whenever the computers became more popular, people had them in their homes, and it's a science project. It's part of what's called Citizen Science Project. And SETI sent out a call to people who have computers in their home and asked them if they would be willing to download a program on their computers that allowed them to help the bigger computers, the big array thing, the one in the movie contact, to assess the information that was coming in because their computers couldn't do it all. And what they did was they asked people to volunteer time. You don't have to do anything. You download the program before NSA, by the way. The program itself is going to the data. And then what they're doing is they're sending you the data, and your computer is working on that data anytime that the computer is on. And you can see it. You can see a graphic on your computer of it working, and then it would send that data back. That's all it is. But they realized that the resource, they had to redefine what resource meant. Resources in your house. They don't have to buy your computer. They don't have to pay for your time. What they did was they just asked you, if you think this is a worthy project, will you help? That is a model. Big work, small resource, a zillion small resources, the work gets done. And the multiple examples of that, there's another one called Zoo Info. Zoo Info sends out a program, asks people to sign up. They give you a picture of the universe, they want part of the sky with all these different stars and like that. They give you a 1 minute tutorial. If it looks like this, it's number one. If it looks like that, this number is. And so what happened was, 2 million people signed on, and 2 million people began to identify this subjectively. This looks like a one, this looks like a two. And after a couple million people send in their stuff, they go through all the data, and you find that there's a clustering of people who say this is a number two. Good enough for them. And so they just keep sending it out. So this idea of a citizen science project is working on a concept that if you don't have big money, it doesn't mean you can't do the job. How else that plays out? Some fun for good. I don't know if you guys know that. On Kickstarter. These are fundraising projects. You put your story out, ask if people want to help. You can kick in any amount you like. They put in $5. Well, a million people kick in $5. You got it. Your project is up and running. What happens is this is not directed. This is not a government or a top-down effort. This is at the bottom. You use the technology that's available. You get people to come and help you one time. You don't really have a relationship with them because that person's relationship is with the project, not with you. So it's a different kind of relationship. One of the things that, my job, I run a field trip program for Hawaiian Pacific University. And when we get 50 students on a site, and we get posted, somebody invites us to help them open a local. Farmer can't really open that right away because it's a lot of work. But we can do it in a couple hours, the whole thing. You got big resource days at our disposal. Everybody's doing a little bit of work. We're going to leave and it's done. So the farmer gets this local ready. What do we get? We got experience working in local, we know how to do it. We got lunch. We got lunch. We had an opportunity to interact with each other outside of the classroom setting. We have now made a relationship between ourselves and their folks. Those effects, those side benefits, no one counts them. That's not anywhere on a chart. But those things are happening constantly. So this is an idea of a model. How do you rethink what a resource base might look like in order to apply it to a real life problem in the nation? How can we figure out how to deal with homelessness and houselessness if the government can't do it? They can't do it. Can we do it? If we're the resource base, how would each of us individually attack that problem?
I don't know how many of you are from this island, but if you go to Waimea and you drive into Waimea town, and right where you take the bend, right before you hit the intersection, on the left-hand side you're going to see a park, you're going to see a playground. 20 years ago or so, all we had was a swing set. And we kept saying, no fence, really, and it was dangerous. And we kept, and the county, it was run by the county, and county and state, no more money, because we're always depending on the government, right, for financial resources. So our community in Waimea, we got together and we built that park. And it was one of the most wonderful things because what happened was an architect flew in from the mainland and met with the kids at our Waimea Elementary School and asked the kids, what do you want? And they drew pictures. They drew pictures of a dragon tower and a bridge and all of that. My son was small at the time. They were all involved in that. And he took that concept and he designed the, the basis for it. Then there went out a list with everything that would be needed. That went spread out to the community, construction companies, people. We need hoses, we need shovels, we need shifts. They even had a huge tent put in the park, and we had entertainment. Clowns came. The hotels over here made food. Remember? They made food for them, and so you could come and bring your child, and your child was being watched. And while your child was being watched, the kids were doing an art project. They were cutting strips of paper and gluing them together, making that chain ring thing. And it went on a couple, I don't know if it was Couple Radio at the time, but one of the radio stations was operating out of there. And I think we did it in 5 days. And the first few days was construction companies coming in and laying the foundation and everything. You could even purchase a post or what have you. The kids had to think of a name, so CNS Cycle at that time donated a bike, and all the kids had to bring pennies, empty their pennies. Whoever brought the most got the bike. But anyway, there was all of this going on, and it was nonstop, 24/7. I mean, you saw sisters over there pulling at 12 midnight, pulling the wheelbarrows, everything. When the thing was finished, we all formed a circle, and the kids made the chain, and we completed and we got a park. And for years after that, there was no graffiti. There was nothing, nobody was in there damaging the park because it was ownership. Everybody owned it. And now it's changing because the next generation come, people forgot about it. But working with nonprofits and working with my community in Waimea through nonprofits, I've learned something very interesting. And I've learned that if you're helping the kids out, the parent is going to get involved, the family's going to get involved. And I've heard that I've discovered that I can make a list of things that is needed. And I can put it out. And people do come and they bring whatever it is that they need to bring. And I think we could economically run our little communities on its own. You know, like we know, oh, we need a truck. Uncle got the truck. We know we need this. I think we could do without a lot of this dependency on approval through government and what have it. I really think we can do this.
More, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so actually, that's a different kind of model that you're talking about. So like a double layer, right? What was the name of the word?
Anue Nue.
I think you're our
In
neighbor.
Waimea.
We're your neighbor right now.
Same thing happened with Higashi too.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that, because we're looking for models that might work, what filters down. And yours sounds really good because one of the things I think was listed was community-based. Okay, so if you have a community-based idea and the people act on it and the work gets done, you meet your goal, government was really nowhere in sight. But they must have a purpose, so, I mean, so, what are they for? I mean, so there's interaction with the government outside, right? But what is their role inside?
Okay. So, you guys all got a handout, and it's about a company called Tom Sheets. And for a lot of people, it's gonna be a struggle to make this shift because, okay, it's great, it works at a small village, but how do we deal with this in the bigger world? Tom Shoes is an international company, and their foundation of what they do is get one, give one. You buy a pair of shoes at a value that, because you have resource, you buy, they give a pair to somebody else who doesn't. And they do that all over the world. They also do it with water, with eyesight, with a bunch of other different kinds of projects. But as we look at the layers and the sizes that economies can go, from the grassroots to the large, there are ways that all of those economies can share. I just wanted to plant that seed, and it's something you guys can consider and keep in the back of your mind, that even large entities can be Pono, or move toward Pono in a way that's sort of resolved.
Large international
Yes.
entities. So this company, which produces high-end shoes, is not selling to the general public, because most people can't afford it. But the people who are buying know that when they purchase those high-end shoes, somebody else is going to get a benefit. That's one of the reasons they bought the shoes. So we may want to assume that people really do want to help, but they're not really sure how to help, and they're not necessarily into the thing, but they're willing to do this, knowing that some of this benefit is going somewhere else. Yeah. And so the telephone companies that do that, there are a couple, I forget what they're called.
Credo.
Yeah, Credo. There are a couple of phone companies that some of their money goes towards some kind of environmental or social justice issue. It's not much, but the fact is they're holding their own. So somebody must like the idea. So you can take advantage of those kinds of models and see what filters through. That comes to this concept of service business or service entity. Can you create a company or automatically some of your profit goes somewhere to benefit the wider community? You can, why not? You can build it into your system. I would like to give a couple of examples, but I don't know if it's a good idea. And we can talk about Parker Ranch.
Yeah, I see Canadian schools.
Let's talk about it.
Okay, we'll talk about something else. Well, we did meet with, Park and Ranch guys yesterday and listened to some of the stuff that they were doing, and it sounded really good. Because it sounded like they had an investment in the community itself. We let them talk, but we also tried to insert some ideas about how they might want to do that. What can you do that would empower the community, and as a result of empowering the community, raise your profits? I mean, so self-interest is there, but it's not necessarily the thing that drives. If the community wellness or well-being is first, your stock, your credibility, your financial assets might go up. And it's a very small investment for them to make, really, considering how much there is. A small investment to make for the wellness of that community with really big returns, sharing the wealth mindset. I think those kinds of things are going to exist forever. Big corporations are there until they collapse.
I was gonna say, do you also wanna talk about Chapel the restaurant?
Oh, so in Kaneohe, actually, there's a restaurant called Jaopia Thai, and really, really good Thai food. Been there forever, a long time. And the mom, or the person who owns that restaurant, got cancer. She and her husband had that restaurant together, and she died. So they were going under because her mom came in to cook, but you're in mourning, right? And it's like the Hawaiian fire. The community came to rescue them. Basically came and it said to the mom that we want to help. We don't want you guys to go down, because what you provide is quality food, quality service, reasonable price. And if you guys go on, we don't know who's coming in, basically. Stay. And so what happened was the community rallied around them and their business went up, because everybody started eating over there. So unplanned, undirected, community-based impetus to keep something that they wanted. So the community itself has a lot of power to make determinations about what stays and what goes. And we all know that if somebody comes into your community that you don't like, they make it really clear that we don't want you, that the stuff you do is not Pono, don't come. So there is that model as well. I don't even know, well, we duplicate that, I think, in our own small areas. We just help.
When I was at Hawaiian, we had a lot of things. There were a lot of things I had to do. I had to, number one, educate all the kids about art, because there was no art in the schools in the community. I had to, all these needs. And of course, money, no more money. So I started using our students, our homana, as we taught them, they had to go back out and teach. We took them to the Maile, we did whatever. Started asking the parents for things. Then I started, I mathematically one night, it kind of charged me. I kind of took a look at what it was that we were trying, what we needed, our community needed in that little tiny segment that I was dealing with. And I figured, and how many people live, how many people have had this effect, not just the students, but their family. I started like multiplying it out. I figured if everybody donated 1 hour a week, that's 4 hours a month. If everybody in a community donated it, do you know all of our needs would be met? All of our needs would be met if we just, so that was a concept I always thought, how do we do that? Like everybody just, and then it empowers everybody. There's that part of ownership.
How do we do it broadly?
But how do we do it broadly? But, we can meet all of our needs.
I just want to make, since we were talking about government, I personally grew up being a Franklin Delano Roosevelt Democrat, and I am sad about what's going on today, but I realized that government saved the United States during the Depression. I mean, it saved this nation, it saved almost like civilization. Government, if it's serving the purpose that it was intended, regardless of what country you're talking about, can be a force of good. During Eisenhower's administration, the tax rate was 90% for wealthy people. And you had this huge economic boom during the 50s and the 60s when you had these huge tax rates. So not everybody can donate an hour. Everybody's saying no tax, no tax, no tax. But when we talk about giving to people and giving, farmers, giving back what they have for free and whatnot. There are those who for whatever circumstances, have nothing. There are those who have benefited because society is successful and need to give back to society. That's all tax is. So when people say no tax, no tax, no tax, to me that's a very selfish mindset, because government does serve its purposes. It provides the roads that enable businesses to exist. And if there's going to be a Hawaiian nation, there has to be the infrastructure for people. I mean, just like with the trails, doing the research for one of the for the Aliʻi resolution, I learned that Aliʻi back in the 1600s had a kalabai that all fishermen and farmers had to feed strangers and those who came, to visit them. And there was a fixed, unchangeable kalabai for all time that was going to be the way that it was. And that any old people, any old women or men could sleep on the road and be safe. And it was coupled, it was a kalabai. And I'm learning that these values, I mean, I grew up knowing people who grew up in the Depression, even on the mainland. People used to have gardens, and we used to share, just like you did here. I mean, in our neighborhood, you had more tomatoes, you had more beans, eggplants, whatever. That used to be a mindset because people had gone through that time of having to depend upon themselves and each other. And in today's culture and world, with the technology and whatnot, it's a very, very challenging time. Not just for the Hawaiian people, but for all people, and for the American people as well, with the American government as well.
What the screen may help us do is to actually redefine our relationship with government, not so that we don't have it, but that if you start at the bottom level and you use this particular way of identifying what is common, you actively behave, you live it, our hope is that it will filter up. Basically, because the people who are serving later on are going to serve in those positions of power. If they understand how it works at the bottom level, they may move it up for us. But if they don't move it up for us, then what we're going to see is that doesn't work for us. So we'll just do what we're doing because that works. Mm-hmm. And so, I need to teach them. So the learning is going to go up instead of down. Yeah. I want to just take a little break now and ask you guys, there's this food up there. People help yourself. And then we're going to move into the last portion of it. We're going to talk about outcomes. What do we want out of this? How useful is it to have a discussion like this? Do we want to do more? Is it not useful? Do we want other people to have it? Do we want to collect data? What? I'm not saying that you have to tell me right now, but going to groups, sit down and talk it.
And while you're doing that, you have those post-its. If there are other models that you can think of, other examples, put them on post-its, stick them up here. We'll build a list that people can draw from.
Yeah. And you guys did put in your email addresses, so what we'd like to do is to share with you the information that came out of this by email. Just send you what the results, what the thing was.
If you did not get some tea as well,
Actually, outside.